Welcome everyone, and great to be with you and be back. And yeah, good to see familiar faces. Maybe there's some new folks. If you want to identify yourself, if you're here for the first time, either just kind of raise your hand or just say hi in the chat. But it's lovely to have you and have everybody here together, practicing together. And so I'm Hugh Byrne, and this is the regular Sunday morning class offered by the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, founded by Tara Brach about 25 years ago. And we're part of IMCW, the Center for Mindful Living, which, you know, in pre-COVID times and post-COVID times, is a physical space in Northwest DC, Washington DC, where we have a variety of offerings, classes, and programs, etc. And as most of you know, we've been online for, I guess, almost 18 months now, 16 months or something like that. And in many ways, you know, even though we miss, you know, the contact and being together and how powerful that is, there's also been something really kind of magical about being together in this way too over these months, and I think particularly having people join us from more distant places, you know, Kerry from Saskatchewan, and you know, folks from down in Florida and the Northeast, and Linnea from Spokane, Kerry Mera from I think New Jersey, and you know, and Susan from Pittsburgh. So it's good, as I say, it's good to be together. I think particularly at a time like this. Just before we started, Cassie raised a question about, you know, ways of dealing with opening to grief, you know, because she shared about her grandmother, loss of her grandmother, and it's still, she said, it's hard to open to it, that it still feels, I think, too close and raw to do that. And so we just had an initial kind of, Emily shared a little before we formally got started. But I just want to share my own, just one experience I had this week. What I'm going to invite you to do sometime in the next few minutes, if you would like to, in the chat, is kind of just share a few words about how you're holding all that's kind of going on right now. You know, the big events, you know, name three of them. Obviously, you know, the whole situation in Afghanistan, you know, and I'm not going to get into the, you know, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the mights and the might be's, but just on the human dimension of that, you know, the human suffering. You know, there's one woman, you know, democracy activist who. It was a short video in the New York Times who spoke about her dreams having died, you know, and thinking about the situation of women and children, particularly under a, you know, under a medieval kind of regime there. You know, there's a lot of other things come up as well, you know, what the meaning of it is and what might have been done differently and all of that. And I'm not going to get into that today, but as I say, just really kind of inviting and opening to what's alive for you. You know, obviously the earthquake in Haiti and the suffering, you know, around that. I think over 1,200 people died and great devastation. But in a way, it kind of got sidelined a little bit. Not so much attention, just because Afghanistan is so front and center, and then everything around COVID and the continued, you know, the Delta variant and all of the all of the continued spread and all of the divisions. And again, I'm not going to get into those divisions, but just acknowledging really the depth of the divisions that are there, and how easy it is to get into judgments and a sense of separation, us and them and all of that. And that's really painful when we do that. And so kind of inviting you to kind of just kind of check into where you are. I mean, I'm not saying everybody feels the same by any means. Obviously we don't. Or even if that's front and center for you, it may be other things going on in your life, that are taking the kind of the energy and the bandwidth. But those issues, as well as the larger kind of the bigger issue of climate change and all of the different expressions of that, and again, none of this getting so much into the content of it or who's right and who's wrong, but just holding all that, And so what I'm really interested in exploring today, and it's, in my mind, it's very open-ended how we go there. I don't want to do so much a formal kind of like a talk with a beginning and an end, but really kind of explore it more in somewhat partly in dialogue and partly in practice. And also I'll be sharing some things this morning. And so really just inviting you for now maybe to just take a minute and check in with your own experience, check in with your body, your breathing, your emotions, what's present, what's going on in the mind. Just take a moment to make room for whatever is here, make space for whatever is here, and just see what is kind of predominant in your own experience. What I wanted to share was how this week I found myself really, really coming back and taking refuge in the Dharma, in the teachings and the practices. I kind of, it was almost over and over again, because I could see my mind where my mind was going. Just a little, I come out of a background of political science and analysis about political processes and all of that. And, what I did graduate work in, and I've written a book on that. And so, my mind easily goes into, at times like this, why did this happen? And could it have been done a different way? And what are the implications of this for the future, for other policies, other things going on, climate change, etc. And again, not getting into those questions, but just acknowledging that that was where a lot of my mind went. And, one of the things I noticed was, is a thing that I know about, but, I have to keep seeing over and over, is how when my mind goes, when I go into my mind, I go into analysis and projection and thinking. It can be helpful up to a point, but it can also easily go into overload of information, triggering of emotions, of fear, anxiety, worry. I saw some of those things coming up. I saw my mind going, well, what will this mean for this and that? And one of the things I found was, I was noticing that I wasn't so, it's a little bit what Cassie was saying with your grandmother. I was finding it was in a way separating me from the human dimension of what was going on, of the people and their lives and their suffering, really. And I found myself just a day or two ago, I was sitting with my partner, Rebecca, and we were just talking, and I just suddenly found myself crying, and it was really about what I wasn't really, what I hadn't up to then really been able to touch into, which was just a real sadness and a deep grief about what's being played out. You can argue about, what might have been done, what should have been done, but just the raw human reality of that suffering. And again, I come back to don't know mind about, how it's all going to play out. But some things are they're happening right now, and they're so foreseeable from what's happened before about what happens when people aren't allowed to express themselves, in the society where women are treated as, you're to be seen and not heard and covered and all of those things. And what does that mean for people's, for the lives of the people there? And what I found was that the sadness was really felt healing. It felt like, it was like part of me was opening up. And, this reflects back, I think, to some of what we were sharing before we started about the last week's session, where we kind of invited people to share about losses and grief and loved ones who'd passed. For me, just this allowing my heart to, not even allowing, it happened, but my heart opening in that way. In some way, it was like, it felt really, really freeing. There was definitely sadness and grief, and there were tears, but it was much, much a sense of much more openness, flow, spaciousness than being in that place where that was kind of held down in some way. I wasn't deliberately holding it down. I wasn't not wanting to, but I didn't up to then have the tools quite to kind of connect with it or open to it. And it just kind of opened of its own, in some way, of its own, volition. And when the time was right, and the space was there to do it. And I found myself very, very much that's one kind of piece of what I've been thinking about and experiencing and working with over these days. And another is a question of the other ways, the other entryways, the other doorways into kind of freeing ourselves from suffering. I was going to do a talk today, and it was called something like Taking Refuge in the Dharma, 10 practices for opening the heart. And I said that to Rebecca. She said, no, don't do 10. 10 is far too many. Do 3, So yeah, I thought that, yes, there's wisdom in that. I think I might name somewhat later when kind of after we've had a meditation. I'll name 10, but it could easily have been 20 or 30 or 40, And what I'm talking really about are that we can work with any skillful way of being with our experience. It could be being with our body, relating to our bodily experience, or relating to our breathing, or relating to our heart, in compassion or loving kindness, or whatever heart quality kind of opens up. All of those are doorways in, and the Dharma, in one, I think it's in the Zen tradition, they talk about 84,000 Dharma doors. Fortunately, you're not going to have anyone, certainly not me, try and lay out the 84,000 Dharma doors in a talk. But in a way, any of the teachings, I mentioned, I think, don't know mind. What happens when we look at, a difficult situation, whether in the world or in our own lives, through the lens of don't know mind, where we come back, we make that the way of looking. We see, okay, my mind is going into, oh, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and this is possible. Rather than doing that, just say, okay, don't know mind, hold it open, and see what happens when you do that. When we do that, I talked a few weeks ago about compassionate curiosity, which is kind of related to that. What happens when we take any aspect of our experience, anything that we're experiencing, and we bring that quality of compassionate curiosity to it? It might be it might be our own fear around something in our life, a family member who's, going through difficulties. We might feel ourselves in contraction in the body and the mind. And then what happens when we look at that situation, that person, our own response, in the light of kindness, of compassion, and of interest? Does it shift things? Does it change things? And the essence of all of these doors or doorways is we're not talking about them as solid things, breath or body or an idea like don't know or compassionate curiosity. What we're really exploring, what I'm talking about is a relationship. It's a relationship to the body or to the breath that is a freeing, or can be a pathway to freedom, a doorway to freedom. So all of us breathe, and even if we come back to awareness of our breath, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily liberating. Maybe it's a little bit, you might feel a little bit, if we've been very tense or angry and we come back to a breath, that might be a little mini Dharma practice that gives us a little bit of freedom. But the breath itself isn't freeing, isn't freeing. It's our relationship that is freeing, our relationship with the breath or with the body or with any experience. It's, what in Buddhism is called a dependent co-arising. It's a kind of a situation or some conditions, and then how we meet those conditions. That's the co-dependent arising. They depend on each other. They arise together. And so, with a painful situation like the suffering in Afghanistan, if that is just met with, well, my mind is really somewhere else, and I don't really open to that, then it doesn't become a pathway to freedom. It's only in that relationship where I bring that awareness, kindness, compassion into that connection with, let's say, a situation in our own lives or in the world. It's in that relationship that the freedom comes. And that's kind of really what I'm wanting to explore today. And as I say, there's many, many different doorways into that. And my invitation today, and as we, over the weeks and over the months, as we continue to, explore together and share talks and share practices, is like, what are the doorways that are most helpful to you? What helps you when you feel, for example, really stuck in suffering about something, a difficult person in your life, what helps you to kind of untangle yourself from that? What helps you find release? And all of these are potential ways of doing that. Just coming back to the body, taking some deeper breaths and just exploring that, what's happening in my body? Can I open to it? Can I make space for it? And can that relationship with my body, that open-hearted, kind, allowing, can that be a pathway to letting go? Can it help kind of release some of that holding, that craving that keeps me caught up in suffering? And so that question, I think, is an important one. What are the doors for you that can, and it may, it's not always the same one by any means. Sometimes we might come back to a practice and it's been very helpful in the past, but it just doesn't connect with us, or we don't connect with it at that time. But in some way we can look at you know, our practice as like, you know, having a toolkit, you know, a toolkit with, you know, guys, maybe not all guys, but, you know, people, you know, electricians or whoever, you know, they have their whole kit or their whole, you know, this tool is for this and this one for this. And in our practice, I think we can have, you know, we can be very agile in using, as the more we become familiar with the teachings and practices, the more we can say, okay, right now, this loving kindness or compassion might be what's needed. Or another time it might be just being aware in a non-judging way of what we're experiencing. So seeing is always contextual. You know, we never see things, we see the same thing, we never see it twice. You know, it's a different, you know, it's changed, we've changed, the relationship has changed, even if it's the same quote thing and we're the same us, which of course we're not, because we're changing all the time. So that relationship is changing all the time. So having that freshness of relating to our experience, that kind of moment to moment, you know, starting anew, you know, which is another, you know, another door, you know, of just like, okay, this moment is not the same as the last one, you know, and just seeing that. And the more clearly we see it, the more freeing it is, the more we untangle ourselves from suffering. So what I'd like to pause here and kind of just leave that out there, you know, just in as a question to explore, and go into a meditation. But before doing that, just looking through the chat, what folks have shared. Oh, sorry about the IMCW website, Linnea. Cassie said, yeah, easier to access through livingmindfully.org. It's great. Karen sharing a lot of grief, sadness, and anger. Yeah, I hear you. Thank you. But Bettina, I feel sad, frustrated, some fear and sense of overwhelm about the state of all this. Thank you. I think that probably speaks for others too. Julie, I had meetings this week with high-level Biden-Harris administration officials on protecting LGBTQ and youth of color. So I'm feeling empowered to push back on the medieval Christian nationalists in this country. Thank you, Julie. And Mark, sad, worried, and tired. Jody, sad, worried. All that's going on is overwhelming and exhausting. Yeah. Kerry, rawness of suffering seems to preclude the ability to find meaning. Trying to hold my emotions in the tension of so much that is not known about the outcome, keeping prayers and wishes based on individuals, not big picture. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing there. You know, just maybe bouncing off of Kerry, particularly just the more that we can come back to the immediate, the personal, the individual, you know, the more we're coming out of abstractions. And it's, you know, it's certainly wonderful and helpful that we as humans have the capacity to abstract, to look at ideas, to compare ideas, to look at things in terms of big processes. But if we really want to be connected with ourselves, with others, and with life, I mean, if we really want to free our own hearts, I think that really does mean starting at home. It means starting, you know, with ourselves and with our own emotions and mind states and bodily feelings and all that's going on for us. And as well as starting with, you know, individual people and their lives and their situations. I think that then becomes a doorway to freeing ourselves, to finding peace even in the midst of the sadness and the sorrow and the emotions and mind states that people shared, that folks shared, that even in the midst of that we can find find peace, and we can find, even joy. That it doesn't preclude that. And in fact, in some ways, it can make it even more available to us, that when our hearts open, as I said with myself, of just kind of suddenly the tears came, and the sadness, and the connection with people's actual lives as I was seeing, and what I can imagine and envision, that there was a lot more space for connection, just in an immediate level with my loved ones, and with others, with myself, really. It's not easy to be in that closed place, in that tight place. It's very limiting and very constricting, and it can take a lot of practice of coming back and beginning again, and bringing in the heart, consciously bringing in the heart to help kind of soften and loosen the hardness, the tightness of that, particularly emotions like fear and anger and judgment and blame and all of those things, which it's so easy to go into when we have these large, public debates, whether it's COVID or Afghanistan policy things. We easily go into that tight places. And so I think, and I'd say probably especially for activists in those areas, it's having a practice that allows us to come back to ourselves, come back to the human connections and the human dimensions is really, in a way, I think is really, really essential. And I think some of you know I've done a lot of work with humanitarian aid workers in the Middle East and in Africa particularly, and other parts of the world, and sharing these teachings and these practices, and in over the years, just seeing how much stress they're under and how hard it is for them to show up fully with compassion and with kindness. When they're in that tight place, not surprising, but very, very much what I experienced. And so the more we can allow ourselves and help ourselves open our hearts to what's present, to what's real, to what's true, taking refuge in the truth rather than in the stories of the mind, the more that we can, the more we can free our own hearts. So easily I stop, and then something else comes up, and then I continue. So I will pause here, and we'll have a sit together. So let's take, maybe we'll take about 20-25 minutes for a sit, and then Emily will graciously lead us in some lovely body mindfulness of the body practices. And then I think it would be really good today to do some sharing with each other in groups. We don't always have the time, etc., to do that, but I'd like for us to do that today. Maybe come back together in the full group and share what's coming up for people. So take a moment or two to find a posture that's comfortable and relaxed. So if you're sitting, let your posture be very dignified, alert, with a spine erect, but not tense, not tightly holding, but with kind of a relaxed alertness. The bodily posture, as we know, affects the mind. If we're slouching, the mind's going to start slouching too. Likewise, the mind affects the body. So if the mind is bright, the body will tend to be more alert, more present. So just take some moments to find a posture that's relaxed, alert. Close your eyes if you like. Let the attention come inward. Let the attention drop out of the thinking mode down into the body. Feel the contact with the seat or the cushion beneath you. You might invite the shoulders to relax. Relax the hands. Just let them rest wherever they're comfortable, in your lap or on your knees, on your thighs. Take a moment or two to do whatever will help you to arrive as fully as you can right now. You know, we often begin with some deeper breaths. So in your own time, it might be just a couple, 2 or 3 deeper breaths as a way of just helping you relax a little bit more, settle, be here. Scanning the body and inviting a relaxing of any area of tension can also help in letting go of any unconscious holding, tightening, tensing up. Inviting a smile can help send a message to our brain and to our nervous system that we can relax, we can be at ease. Putting your hand on your heart, maybe on the other hand on the belly, can also be excuse me, can also be a way of really connecting with ourselves. And when we do, there can be a softening, a relaxing. Feeling that connection, feeling your breath, maybe feeling your heartbeat, feeling your body, feeling yourself here now. Taking a moment to reflect on gratitude can also be a way of stepping out of the focus more on what's wrong or what needs to change, to shift to what we have, what we're grateful for. I might think of, even with all the difficulties, how our own lives, at least for many of us, have some relative level of ease to them. Not by any means everyone here, but some cushion that we think of people in other parts of the world, clearly not having, in Haiti, the Middle East, in Africa particularly, parts of Latin America. Just appreciating what we have in so many ways, people, loved ones in our life, even if we're going through difficulties. They're things that we can reflect on and reflect in gratitude on. These practices and others can help really set the stage for us to open to what's present for us, maybe what's difficult for us. We're not necessarily just approaching whatever comes up, which might be very difficult from a place of tension or anxiety. We're inviting some sense of ease that can allow us, maybe support us in holding what's here right now. Just inviting a kind and non-judging awareness of whatever you're experiencing right now. You might bring awareness to the feelings that are present in the body. Just allow whatever's here to be here. If there's an area of tightness or contraction, see if you can just make space around it. Allow the feelings that are here just to as much space as they need, allowing the feelings to come, to stay for a while. Then when they're ready to go. Can I meet this moment with kindness, with acceptance? Letting your breathing and your awareness of your breathing be a support as you open to what's present right now in the body, in the heart, in the mind. When the mind moves into thoughts, whether it's making plans, daydreaming, worrying, judging, blaming, wanting something, just notice that. You might just notice if it's if it's a habit, if it's a pattern that you get pulled into. Do you get pulled towards particular responses to what's going on? Might be some it might be pushing away or aversion or resistance to what we're feeling or resistance to people. Others, it might be feeling needy, wanting. Might be kind of spacing out, distraction, just kind of going off into daydreams. Might be worrying, stress. Notice if there are kind of habitual patterns that you tend to go into, which is a good signal that there's something to pay attention to be curious about, to be compassionately curious about. Just coming back to the body, coming back to the breath when the mind does go off. Making it a practice to come back and begin again in any moment. Can I bring an attitude of curiosity, of openness to this, whatever this is right now? So that everything is included, nothing is to be kept away. Everything is just to be seen, to be met with kindness, and then to dissolve back into the emptiness. Can this moment be a moment of peace? Can this experience, this relationship with whatever you're feeling, sensing, touching, experiencing right now, can this be an experience of peace? As Dorothy Hunt says, does peace require an absence from your boss, your spouse, yourself? Do you think peace will come some other place than here, some other time than now, in some other heart than yours? Peace is this moment without judgment, that's all. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. This is from a Tibetan teacher, Khyentse Rinpoche. Mind creates both the entanglements of the world and freedom from them. Yet there is nothing much to it. It's just thoughts. Once we recognize that thoughts are empty, the mind will no longer have the power to deceive us. Once we recognize that thoughts are empty, the mind will no longer have the power to deceive us. notice how you're meeting your experience right now. This relationship is really at the core of our practice. How am I meeting this moment, this experience? It's really the basis of the transformative power of this practice. By meeting our experience in a particular way, becomes a path to greater freedom. If we experience something difficult with acceptance, then the difficulty becomes less solid, less a thing. If we experience pain with an accepting attitude, something changes in the pain itself. And something shifts. And the more we practice, the more we deepen our practice, the more even things that we think of as pretty solid, like pain, can dissolve through our relationship to them. Not meaning that in a simplistic way, but in as a fruit of deep practice, that it's a way of dissolving the suffering that can come with different forms of pain. This is from Antonio Machado Walker. Walker, your footsteps are the road and nothing more. Walker, there is no road. The road is made by walking. Walking, you make the road, and turning to look behind, you see the path you never again will step upon. Walker, there is no road, only foam trails on the sea. Emily, would you like to lead us?
Thank you, Hugh, so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite you all to stand up and just find your feet swaying from side to side and open into the space around you. Be gentle with yourself. Have the awareness and the kindness that we've been sitting with just now. And then open up wide, looking up, and gather the energy of the sky, the sun and clouds, and the day-blind stars above. And bring that to your heart. And gather the energy of all of us together. And then gather the energy of the earth, that which provides so much abundance, and bring that all to your heart. We'll start with Cactus Arms. This is such a good move for your shoulders. So starting with an inhale to center, exhale, lower down. Inhale, rise. Exhale, lower. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, lower down. Inhale, rise and extend out. Now turn your right palm down and look over your left palm. Another shoulder move. As you inhale, switch to the right palm. Switch to the left. Inhaling to the right. And left. And right. And then draw your arms up, turn your palms out, and float your arms down. And then draw your hands behind you at the waist, being gentle here. Inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, draw your elbows together. Inhale, back to your waist. Again, to center. Inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, drawing your arms down and together. And then bring your hands back, float your arms, moving your shoulders independently. And move them the other way. And now the last move, bringing your hands above your knees, come into a flat back. Extending out your spine, moving away from your pelvis, and then release into the pull of gravity, lowering down however much you wish to go, to surrender to the earth, to all that the earth wishes to give us. One more breath in, filling your rib cage. Exhale, soften, allow. And then place your hands back above your knees and roll up the spine, bringing your hands to heart center and release to the sky, to all of us. And to the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. That was lovely as always. Thank you. Anyone else like to give any feedback or have any questions based on kind of the who was? Yeah, Ronnie, please.
Okay. This doesn't. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. When my mother died, and I was feeling, the overwhelming grief, and then it would kind of start to come and go. And I remember being walking through a store around Mother's Day and seeing all the Mother's Day cards and just being hit by grief that I could no longer participate, sort of, not in the Hallmark moment, but just in this expression of love to my mother. And what I ended up doing was buying Mother's Day cards that I would have given my mother and using them to write notes and make donations to smaller charities or causes that she would have supported. And So I'm mentioning that now because it's kind of both the how do we help and how do we connect. And I started doing that regularly, and I got some wonderful notes back from some of these organizations. And it just was a way of continuing my relationship with the person that I had lost, and feeling like I was continuing her, presence in the world. So it's a very simple thing. It doesn't go to the larger issues, but it really was helpful writing those notes about how this cause was important to her. So I just put that out there.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. And Jen shared in the chat that, thanks, Cassie, also IRC, International Refugee Committee, had an Amazon wish list for refugees, and it's almost all bought. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Anyone else want to share about anything that you're going through, or any of the practices that work for you? Be interested in anything anyone has to offer. Yeah. Cindy shared earlier about cultivating equanimity. That was one of the practices I was going to share as, as a way of meeting our experience, cultivating the willingness, to experience the joys and the sorrows, and to see them with in a sense, with an equal mind. And in doing that, to be able to lessen our clinging to the ones that we like, and the pushing away of the ones, of avoiding the ones that we don't like. So it's a powerful practice. Similarly, the practices of impermanence and recognizing selflessness, if we find ourselves getting caught up in, a difficult emotion about what's going on, or I just read an article today about somebody she's an academic, and a sister isn't willing to take the vaccine, doesn't believe in them, and speaking about her sadness really at the separation between them, and that I think is multiplied hundreds of thousands, probably millions of times over around the country and around the world as well. And a question, and a practice really is, can we stay clear about, what we believe and what we believe is most helpful, and do whatever we can, perhaps to convince a person, but ultimately they'll make their own decisions. And to be able to do that without separation, without kind of cutting with, into ourselves, so that we, our heart is separated off there, pushed outside of the field, if you like, of connection and caring, because, there's the judgment that says you are this, whatever this is, and it's easy for, for anyone, wherever you are in the kind of political spectrum, to get into righteousness and, we're right and they're wrong. And, in some ways, I think there is there is evidence and there is science, and those are worthy ways of discerning what's most helpful and what's most harmful. but can we hold that without, turning it into something that's afflictive, separation, cutting ourselves off from people. Sometimes we need to do that for safety or for other reasons. But, I think Jack Cornfield said in one of his books, and he said, we may have to cut people out of our lives, but we shouldn't cut them out of our hearts. Can we even, if we think, if somebody's done something harmful, can we at least keep our hearts open, or at least keep our hearts open to the possibility of compassion? We may not be able to experience it right then and there, but open to compassion, open to forgiveness, open to loving kindness. And that's really what I think the Dharma offers us, is that freedom of the heart, where whatever the conditions are, whatever the situation is, we don't have to cut ourselves off from ourselves, from others, or from life, or from the world. Whatever it is they do, we still, our work is, our practice is to keep our hearts open. Again, not to say it's easy, with certain people who we see, are doing really harmful things. But it is a practice, we can cultivate those qualities. Think of someone like the Dalai Lama and his attitude and his practice vis-a-vis the Chinese authorities who've done so much harm, to his country, the Tibetan people, killings, torture, imprisonment, all of that. And yet his practice is, I understand, every day to send them compassion, to cultivate compassion for them. Not an easy practice, but all of these practices we can develop, we can deepen, we can strengthen. We don't start off being able, having a heart as wide as the world necessarily, that allows us to take in and love people who are doing harmful things. But with a training, I think more and more, and this is what I've come to see over the years, and it's really had an impact on my life and my practice, is that even those who are causing harm are themselves suffering. I've come to see more the conditions that lead people to where they end up being, where the woman's sister who, is an anti-vaxxer, and, that under certain conditions, maybe under fear or isolation or lacking, objective information, can get sucked into, believing things that are harmful, that are causing loss of life. Can we hold that in discernment and in compassion without creating separation? And not that it's not an easy practice, but I think we can. Linnea says there's suffering everywhere, so I become aware of the closer suffering. For the distant suffering, I open-heartedly send love to people in Haiti and Afghanistan, to those who've helped cause the suffering by their greed. Thank you for sharing that. Is there a hand? I think I see a hand. Anyone see a hand?
Yes, Leslie has her hand up.
Oh, Leslie, thank you. Thank you, Cassie.
On a related topic, I've begun to think again, after not thinking about it about not getting back to the basics of nonviolence. Looking at Afghanistan, looking at the drumbeat of daily killings in this country. I've also been reading a really remarkable book titled "Say Nothing" by Patrick Radden Keefe, about the troubles in Northern Ireland, and just killing, the just knee-jerk response of killing as an answer to everything. I was just going to say, if anyone else is interested in talking in a group, maybe sharing a little reading, because it's been a while since, you know, just the precepts of nonviolence and the whole subject, which I think is very much related to everything we're talking about, has kind of been, well, at least in my life, addressed front and center. I mean, I could really use a refresher, for lack of a better term.
Great, thank you, Leslie. And maybe if people would like to indicate in the chat, and you can share, share information and be in touch around that. And maybe even after, if you can stay around and just kind of connect in a more informal way then as well. I think that's a great idea. I've begun a book which I think looks like being a really good book, and I saw her interviewed on one of the Sunday shows a couple of weeks ago. A book, I think it's called Hot Conflict by Amanda Ripley. And it's very, very interesting about how when conflict reaches a certain kind of level, it takes on a life of its own, and it ceases to be really about the issue that we think we're struggling about, but it's much more about kind of identity. If anyone's interested, I think her name is Amanda Ripley. She's a journalist, and she worked on this for about 5-6 years, I think. And I believe it's called Hot Conflict. I'll probably finish it within a year because I'm reading about 6 books at the same time, but you know how that is. I've just read a chapter and it seems really good. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Shall we have a short meditation to finish, and then some sharing of announcements? Okay. So just let's find a comfortable posture. Taking your seat again. Maybe taking a few deeper breaths. You might notice if anything has changed in you since when we began an hour and a half or so ago. You know, has anything shifted? Has anything opened? Anything closed? Inviting a kind, non-judging awareness to whatever's present for you right now. Kind, accepting. These last few minutes of our time together, we would do a little bit of a Tonglen based practice. You know, in the Tibetan practice of Tonglen, we invite a breathing in of the suffering of the world, and kind of opening, letting it be transformed in our own hearts and our own beings, and then breathing out kindness, joy, love, peace, whatever, we're out into the world, particularly towards people and places where there is suffering. I just invite you to do this, an adapted version, and as you breathe in, just breathe in a wish of kindness for yourself. That could be accompanied by words or a phrase, may I be happy, may I be safe. Just breathing in that wish for yourself. And on the out breath, breathing out kindness and compassion towards everyone who's here, all of us here together. Breathing out, may you be happy. May you be safe. May you be filled with loving kindness, held in loving kindness. Breathing in kindness to yourself. Breathing out kindness, compassion to everyone who's here. Feeling us all here in a field of kindness. Wishing each other well. As you send out kindness and compassion to everyone, you might also feel it coming in towards you. Breathing it in. So wishing yourself well on an in-breath. Wishing everyone here well on an out-breath. And as you breathe out, you could include others in different places who are suffering, who are wishing for their well-being. May you be safe. Think of the women and girls in Afghanistan whose lives have been changed pretty much overnight, very short time. Just holding them. Whoever comes up for you, the people of Haiti, suffering after the earthquake. People in harm's way with the storm, with Hurricane Henri. May everyone be cared for, be safe, free from harm. Wishing yourself well and finishing by wishing well to all beings everywhere, human, non-human, all want to be free of harm, free of pain, free of suffering. Finish with Derek Walcott's poem, Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you'll greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you have ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Thank you everyone for being here today and participating. We'll just finish with a few announcements. I'll mention a couple of things. I have an 8-week course on the Buddha's central teaching on the Eightfold Path, the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, beginning on September 20th. So since we're doing it online, there's still space, and please feel free to sign up. I'm really excited about teaching the course following on from the Four Noble Truths course. And if you sign up for the Eightfold Path course, you'll have access to the teachings and the meditations from the Four Noble Truths course as well. And just mention that there's no charge, no set cost for the class, but you're invited if you are able to, and if you're inclined to give dana or generosity. That's how it helps pass on the teachings, how they've come down through 2,500 years. And it supports me as the teacher in my livelihood of having the privilege of sharing these teachings. So thank you for your support.